can't believe it. They do this every time.
Oh, hello, Maggie. How are you?
Hi, Grandpa. Sorry I woke you up.
Oh, you didn't wake me up, sweetheart. I was just resting my eyes.
Your eyes must have been very tired. I could hear them snoring from all the way in the kitchen.
Together, I guess we make quite a racket, don't we? Do you mind my asking what has you so upset?
It's Mom and Dad. They said I could open my presents right after church. They even promised. Now they say I have to wait until tomorrow.
Well, I did hear your mom say she was awfully tired after directing the Sunday school program tonight.
I'm not asking them to stay up all night, just till I can open my presents, and they can open theirs too.
Oh, I'm sure they would appreciate that, Maggie. But you know, there are presents that we can give one another that are even better than the ones that fit in a box.
Wait, I'm getting a mountain bike, aren't I? This is so cool.
Oh, that's a good guess, Maggie. But I'm talking about more important presents, like giving of yourself.
What do you mean, Grandpa?
Well, like what did we learn at the Christmas pageant tonight at church? What was God's special gift?
God gave us Jesus, Grandpa. Everybody knows that.
That's right, Maggie. God gave us His Son, Jesus. And that's a present too big to fit under a Christmas tree. That was a very unselfish thing for God to do, wouldn't you say?
I guess so.
And don't you think that maybe God would like us to be unselfish too, even on Christmas?
Sure, but does that mean we shouldn't want any presents?
There's nothing wrong with wanting presents, sweetheart. Being unselfish does mean that we should try to understand, like if Mom and Dad are too tired or too busy to do the things we want them to do right now. God wants us to think about others' needs before our own needs. That's what being unselfish is all about.
So waiting until tomorrow to open my presents would be kind of a present to Mom and Dad.
I believe so, Maggie. You know, this all reminds me of a story that I once read about a giant who didn't want to share his special gifts with the people around him. And because he was so selfish, he lived for many years in a winter with no Christmas, no sign of spring. Hey, would you like to hear it? It might help you forget those presents.
Sure.
Okay, let me see if I can remember how the story begins. Every afternoon, as they were coming home from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them.
How happy we are here!
One day the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend, the Cornish ogre, and had stayed with him for 7 years. After the 7 years were over, he had said all that he had to say, for his conversation was limited, and he determined to return to his own castle. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden.
"What are you doing there?"
he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away.
"My own garden is my own garden. Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself."
So he built a high wall around it and put up a notice board, "Trespassers will be prosecuted."
"What are you children doing, playing all around my land? My garden is my garden, that's not hard to understand. It's my lawn with my flowers, that's my castle and my tree. And the only one that plays with them is me, me, me. I will build a wall around it, and you'll know what's mine is mine, and you'd better not come sneaking past this no trespassing sign."
He was a very selfish giant. The poor children now had nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander round the high wall when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside.
How happy we were there.
Then the spring came. And all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant it was still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. Once a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass, but when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and frost.
Spring has forgotten this garden.
So we will live here all the year round.
Spring has forgotten this garden. We will live here all year long. No time for flowers or blossoms. Come join our wintry song.
The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them.
Spring has forgotten this garden. We will live here all year long. No time for green grass or sunshine. Come join our wintry song.
And he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he roared all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down.
"This is a delightful spot,"
said the north wind.
"We must ask the hail on a visit."
Spring has forgotten this garden. We will live here all year long. No time for birds in the treetops. Come join our wintry song.
So the hail came. Every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle till he broke most of the slates. And then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in gray, and his breath was like ice.
"I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming,"
said the selfish giant as he sat in the window and looked out at his cold white garden.
"I hope there will be a change in the weather."
But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. He is too selfish, she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees.
Spring has forgotten this garden. We will live here all year long. No children laughing or playing, only our wintry song.
One morning, the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window, but it was so long since he had heard a bird sing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement.
I believe the spring has come at last.
He jumped out of bed and looked out. What did he see? He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in. They were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see was a little child. And the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene. Only in one corner, it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still quite covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could. But the boy was too tiny, and the giant's heart melted as he looked out.
How selfish I have been,
he said.
What have I done? I can't believe how selfish I have been. The children have returned and brought the spring with them again. The only thing they wanted was to come and climb my tree, but the only guy I thought about was me. I will take my giant axe, I will knock down this great wall, and my lovely, lovely garden will be fun for one and all. Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever.
He was really sorry for what he had done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. and the tree broke at once into blossom, and the little boy stretched out his 2 arms and flung them about the giant's neck and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, came running back, and with them came the spring.
It is your garden now, little children.
And he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye.
But where is your little companion, the boy I put into the tree?
The giant loved him best because he had kissed him.
We don't know. He has gone away.
You must tell him to be sure and come here tomorrow.
But the children said that they did not know where he lived and had never seen him before. And the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon, when school was over, the children came and played with the giant. But the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. The giant was very kind to all the children, yet he longed for his first little friend and often spoke of him.
How I would like to see him,
he used to say. Years went over, and the giant grew very old and feeble. He could not play about any more, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden.
I have many beautiful flowers, but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all.
One winter morning he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep, and that the flowers were resting. Suddenly he rubbed his eyes in wonder and looked and looked. It certainly was a marvelous sight. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were all golden, and silver fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. Downstairs ran the giant in great joy, and out into the garden. He hastened across the grass and came near the child, and when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger.
Who hath dared to wound thee?
For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of 2 nails, and the prints of 2 nails were on his little feet.
Who hath dared to wound thee? Tell me, that I may take my big sword and slay him.
Nay,
answered the child.
but these are the wounds of love.
Who art thou?
said the giant, and a strange awe fell on him, and he knelt before the little child. And the child smiled on the giant.
You let me play once in your garden. Today you will be with me in my garden, which is paradise.
Who art thou? said the giant, and his heart was filled with awe. He knelt before the little child, who smiled on what he saw. The giant wasn't selfish now. He changed his selfish way. And the little boy said, "Giant, won't you come with me today? Long ago, you let me play here, and you helped me climb a tree. From now on, my garden is your home in paradise with me." And when the children ran in that afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms.
It's so sad that the giant had to die.
But remember, Maggie, he was going to heaven to be with the little boy. That was a very special gift.
He loved the little boy so much that his selfishness melted away.
That's right, Maggie. The little boy brought spring into the giant's garden in the dead of winter, and the giant was so grateful that he wanted to share his garden with all the children.
Was the little boy Jesus, Grandpa?
That's a good guess, Maggie. Yes, the giant loved Jesus so much that he was taken to heaven. The giant not only received springtime in the middle of winter, he received a home with Jesus in paradise.
Christmas is like having spring in the middle of winter, isn't it?
I think you're right, Maggie. Yeah, you are right. Jesus comes to us as a little child in the middle of winter and reminds us of the joy of spring and the gift of new life that he gives us.
Jesus sure gives us great gifts.
That's right. Jesus gives us love and life in heaven. Oh, and Jesus himself is a gift. God was so unselfish that he gave his son Jesus to us. And because God was unselfish, now we know how to be unselfish too.
I don't want to be selfish about the gifts that I get. I think the best part about gifts is sharing them with your friends, like the way the giant shared the garden with the children.
And that was a gift too big to fit in any box.
Maybe I could give Mom and Dad the gift of peace and quiet for Christmas.
I think that would be very unselfish of you.
I think I'll go tell Mom and Dad that there are presents too big to fit under a tree, because they are the presents that are really important, like sharing my special gifts and talents.
And being unselfish.
And Jesus.
Yes, Jesus. Jesus is the greatest gift of all.